The suitcase weighed almost nothing. That was the part that broke him. 27 years of life, 3 years of loving Dominic Kang, and everything Seo Jin owned fit into one rolling bag and a backpack slung over his shoulder. He stood in the foyer of the penthouse he had called home for over 2 years, his hand pressed flat against the swell of his belly where their daughter shifted, restless as if she already sensed what was happening. 14 weeks. Barely showing under a loose sweater, but enough that his body had started changing in ways that terrified and amazed him in equal measure. His scent had deepened from its usual jasmine and white tea into something richer, almost honeyed, the way omega scents always thickened during pregnancy. He had been so careful to mask it with scent blockers and neutralizing patches. Dominic did not know yet. Dominic was never going to know. Seo Jin reached into his pocket and pulled out the platinum bonding ring Dominic had given him 18 months ago. Not a mating bond, not yet. Dominic had always found reasons to delay, but a promise ring that Seo Jin had clung to like a lifeline. He set it on the entryway table next to the crystal bowl, where Dominic tossed his keys every evening. The ring clinked once against the marble surface, such a small, final sound. Then he turned, pulled the suitcase behind him, and walked out of Dominic Kang's life without leaving a note, because the words he had overheard 3 hours ago said everything a note never could. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I love seeing where my stories travel to. Back to the story. 6 months earlier, Seo Jin's alarm went off at 5:45 in the morning, the same time it had gone off every weekday for the past 2 years. He silenced it before it could wake Dominic, slipped out of bed with the practiced quiet of someone who had learned which floorboards creaked, and padded barefoot into the kitchen to start the coffee. Routine was the architecture of Seo Jin's life. He had built it deliberately, each small ritual a brick in the wall that kept the chaos of his childhood on the other side. Coffee first. Then a 20-minute run on the building's rooftop track. Shower. Breakfast prep. Review his lesson plans for the day. Out the door by 7:15 to catch the crosstown bus to Westlake Academy, where he taught advanced placement literature to teenagers who would rather be on their phones. He loved it. The teaching, the students, even the grading that consumed his weekends. Literature had saved him once, given him a world to escape into when his own became unbearable, and there was something deeply satisfying about watching a 16-year-old discover that a book could crack them open and rearrange what they thought they knew about being alive. Dominic called it adorable. How Seo Jin lit up talking about his students, how he dog-eared his own paperbacks, how he could lose an entire Saturday annotating a novel he had already read 4 times. Adorable was the word Dominic used most often about Seo Jin, and for a long time, Seo Jin had let it warm him. It was only later, much later, that he recognized adorable as a word people used for things that were small. The penthouse was beautiful. 62nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle with views of Puget Sound that turned amber and violet at sunset. Dominic had bought it before they met, back when he was still building Kang Biotech from a startup in a converted warehouse into the pharmaceutical empire it had become. Everything in the apartment was tasteful and expensive, and chosen by a designer Seo Jin had never met. The only things that were truly his were the overflowing bookshelf in the guest room, his collection of vintage fountain pens, and a framed photo of his mother that sat on his nightstand. His mother. Seo Jin paused, coffee mug halfway to his lips, and let the thought settle. Una Park had been an Omega too. Beautiful. Quiet. Devoted to Seo Jin's alpha father in a way that had seemed romantic when Seo Jin was young, and devastating once he grew old enough to recognize it for what it was. Dependency. Erasure. A woman so thoroughly absorbed into her husband's identity that when he left them for a younger Omega, she had simply collapsed inward, like a building whose support beams had been removed. Seo Jin had been 11. He remembered the scent of it, The way his mother's pheromones shifted from the warm ginger and peach he had known his whole life into something acrid and wilting. Omega grief. It hung in their apartment for months, soaking into curtains and pillows and the walls themselves until the whole place smelled like something dying slowly. She recovered eventually. Took a job at a dry cleaner's, raised Seo-jin alone, put him through college on tips and overtime and sheer stubbornness. But something in her never fully came back. A light, a fire, whatever you wanted to call the thing that made a person feel fully present in their own life. It had gone out the day his father packed a bag and did not come home, and Seo-jin had spent every year since then building a life designed to ensure he would never be that vulnerable. He had a career. He had savings. He had a reputation as a teacher who genuinely changed lives. He had friends, a social life, interests that belonged entirely to him. He was not his mother. He was not the kind of Omega who dissolved when an alpha walked away, or so he had believed. He met Dominic at a fundraiser for the Seattle Public Library, one of those glittering charity events where the real currency was access and the champagne was better than anything Seo-jin could afford on a teacher's salary. He had been invited because one of his former students, now a tech executive, had bought a table and insisted his old AP Lit teacher deserved a night out. Seo-jin remembered the exact moment Dominic's scent reached him. He was standing near the auction displays, reading the descriptions of weekend getaways and signed first editions, when the air shifted. Black cardamom and aged leather with something underneath that was almost metallic, like the air before a thunderstorm. Alpha pheromones so potent they cut through the crowd noise and the competing scents of 200 people and landed directly in Seo-jin's nervous system, like a key turning in a lock. He turned, and Dominic Kang was watching him from across the room. Tall, sharp-jawed, with the kind of stillness that only came from absolute confidence. Korean-American, his black hair swept back from a forehead that could have belonged to a magazine cover, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Seo-jin's monthly rent. His eyes were dark and focused, and aimed at Seo-jin with the fixed intensity of a man who had decided something. Seo-jin's Omega instincts did something they had never done before. They went quiet. No anxious flutter of attraction, no defensive bristling, just a deep, cellular stillness, every part of him exhaling at once and whispering, "Oh, there you are." He hated it immediately, because Seo-jin knew what that stillness meant. Fated mate recognition, the biological jackpot that every Omega romance novel celebrated and every rational Omega dreaded. The idea that your body could choose someone for you before your brain had a single data point was exactly the kind of biological determinism that Seo-jin had spent his adult life resisting. But Dominic was already walking toward him, and Seo-jin's feet had apparently decided to mutiny because they stayed planted exactly where they were. "You're reading the auction descriptions like they're literature," Dominic said, and his voice was a low, careful thing that suggested he was used to people listening. "Most people just look at the price. Most people haven't read enough to know that the way something is described tells you more about the seller than the object," Seo-jin replied, pleased that his voice came out steady. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, interest sharpening into curiosity. "You're a teacher. Is that a guess or a deduction?" "Your hands." Dominic nodded toward them. "Ink stain on your right index finger. Callus from grading. And you're the only person at this event who brought a book in their jacket pocket." Seo-jin's hand went involuntarily to his breast pocket, where the spine of a slim poetry collection was indeed visible. He felt heat climb his neck. "Surveillance or intuition?" "I run a pharmaceutical company. I'm trained to observe what others miss." Dominic extended a hand. "Dominic Kang. I know who you are." Seo-jin took the hand, and the contact sent a jolt up his arm that he refused to show on his face. Seo-jin Park. Seo-jin. Dominic said the name slowly, as if committing it to memory, and his thumb pressed once against the back of Seo Jin's hand before releasing it. The poetry. What are you reading? Yoon Dong-ju, Korean poet. He died in a Japanese prison during the occupation. Seo Jin pulled the book from his pocket. He wrote about stars and wind and counting his own sorrows. Very quiet work, considering the circumstances. My grandmother used to recite his poems. Dominic's voice softened in a way that cracked the corporate polish. She said they were the sound of someone refusing to disappear. That was the moment, not the pheromones or the faded mate pull or the symmetry of his face. It was that sentence. The sound of someone refusing to disappear, because that was what Seo Jin's entire life had been about, and hearing it reflected back from a stranger made something shift inside him that he could not shift back. They talked for 2 hours. Missed the entire auction. Seo Jin learned that Dominic had built Kang Biotech from nothing after his father's pharmaceutical company collapsed in a pricing scandal, that he was 32 to Seo Jin's 24, that he ran 6 miles every morning and read scientific journals in bed before sleeping and had not taken a vacation in 3 years. He was brilliant, driven, controlled, and underneath the alpha authority, there was a loneliness that Seo Jin recognized because he carried the same kind. When Dominic asked for his number, Seo Jin gave it despite every alarm bell ringing in his skull. When Dominic texted the next morning a photo of a sunrise over the sound with the caption, "Counting sorrows or counting blessings today?" Seo Jin smiled for the first time in longer than he wanted to admit. The courtship was intense and consuming, as only alpha and omega pairings could be. Dominic pursued with focus and precision, learning Seo Jin's schedule, his favorite restaurants, his coffee order, his preference for window seats and rainy afternoons, and conversations that lasted past midnight. He sent first editions of books Seo Jin mentioned in passing. He showed up at Seo Jin's school once, unannounced, to deliver lunch because Seo Jin had mentioned skipping meals during exam grading season. Seo Jin resisted, then relented, then fell with the terrifying velocity of someone who had spent their whole life building walls only to discover they had left one gate unguarded. 6 months after the fundraiser, he moved into the penthouse. A year after that, Dominic gave him the bonding ring. "This is my promise," Dominic had said, sliding it onto Seo Jin's finger in the quiet of their bedroom, his cardamom scent thick with sincerity. "When the time is right, when Kang Biotech's expansion is stable and I can give you the ceremony you deserve, we bond properly. But until then, this means you're mine, and I'm yours." Seo Jin had believed him. Why would he not? Dominic had never given him reason to doubt. He was attentive, protective, present in all the ways that mattered, even if his schedule kept him at the office until 9 most nights, and his phone buzzed with emergencies that could not wait. He was building an empire. Empires required sacrifice. Seo Jin understood that. He was patient, independent, secure in his own work and identity. He could wait. What he did not know, what he would not learn until much later, was that patience could be a trap. That waiting for someone to choose you fully is only romantic when they actually intend to. The pregnancy was an accident. Seo Jin had been on suppressants since he was 18, the standard pharmaceutical cocktail that regulated heat cycles and prevented conception. But suppressants were not infallible, and Seo Jin's body had apparently decided to override chemistry with biology in spectacular fashion. He found out at 8 weeks, alone in a pharmacy bathroom, staring at 2 pink lines while his hands shook so hard the test nearly dropped into the sink. His first emotion was terror. Not because he did not want children, he did, someday, in the abstract way that people want things they assume will happen when the timing is right, but because he was unmarried, unbonded, and carrying the child of an alpha who had explicitly asked him to wait. Dominic had mentioned children exactly twice in their relationship, both times in the distant future tense. When things settle down, once the company goes public. Someday language, the kind that pushed everything important to a horizon that never actually arrived. Seo Jin sat on the bathroom floor for 40 minutes, his back against the cold tile, his hand pressed to his flat stomach, and made a decision that he would revisit 1,000 times in the months that followed. He would tell Dominic. Of course he would. But not yet. He needed time to think, to plan, to prepare for every possible reaction. He knew Dominic loved him. But love and readiness were different currencies, and Seo Jin had learned from his mother that presenting an alpha with a surprise he was not equipped to handle could be the first domino in a very long fall. So he waited. 1 week became 2, became 4, became 6. He wore scent blockers to mask the changes in his pheromones. He attributed his morning nausea to a stomach bug. He scheduled his prenatal appointments during school hours and paid out of pocket so nothing would appear on the insurance Dominic provided. Each day he intended to tell Dominic, and each day he found a reason to delay. A board meeting, a product launch, a tense phone call with investors that left Dominic pacing the living room with his jaw clenched and his pheromones spiking with stress. The truth was, Seo Jin was afraid. Not of Dominic's anger, but of his honesty. Because as long as the pregnancy remained a secret, Seo Jin could hold on to the possibility that Dominic would be happy. That the news would close the distance that had been growing between them for months, the late nights that got later, the texts that got shorter, the way Dominic's eyes sometimes drifted during conversations as if his body was present, but his mind was already solving the next problem. Once Seo Jin told him, the possibility would collapse into certainty one way or the other, and Seo Jin was not ready to know which way it would fall. It was a Thursday afternoon, 14 weeks into the pregnancy, when certainty found him anyway. Seo Jin had left school early, a rare migraine that turned out to be pregnancy-related blood pressure changes, and come home to the penthouse 3 hours before Dominic expected him. He intended to lie down, maybe grade papers from bed, and rally before Dominic returned from his evening meetings. The apartment was supposed to be empty. It was not. Voices drifted from Dominic's home office, the door slightly ajar. Seo Jin recognized the bass rumble of Victor Hale, Dominic's oldest friend, and Kong Biotech's chief operating officer. Beta, sharp-tongued, unfailingly loyal to Dominic in a way that had always made Seo Jin feel slightly on the outside of a circle he could see, but never fully enter. With Victor was a second voice. Lighter, laughing. Jason Chen, another alpha from Dominic's inner circle, who ran the venture capital fund that had bankrolled Kong Biotech's early growth. Seo Jin paused in the hallway. He should have announced himself. Should have called out a greeting and continued to the bedroom, but his name surfaced in the conversation like a stone breaking the surface of still water, and his feet stopped moving before his brain could tell them to continue. So, the Seo Jin situation, Jason was saying, his tone casual and amused, the way people discuss logistics rather than lives. You settling that down anytime soon? Or is this still the holding pattern? It's handled, Dominic said. His voice was flat, professional, the same tone he used in board meetings when discussing quarterly projections. He's comfortable, he's happy, there's no urgency. Dom. Victor's voice was careful. The Prestige Pharma merger is moving to final stages. Their board wants stability. Traditional stability. A bonded alpha leading the company, a clear succession narrative. You know what that means. I know what it means. Then you also know that Seo Jin doesn't exactly fit the picture they're looking for. He's a high school teacher. He's an omega with no corporate profile, no family connections, no strategic value. I'm not being cruel, I'm being realistic. A silence stretched. Seo Jin's hand found the wall. His heartbeat was so loud he was certain they could hear it. I never said he was permanent. Dominic's voice. Quiet. Measured. Devastating. Seo Jin was always, I care about him, you know I do, but this was never the end game. I told him we'd bond when the time was right because I needed time to figure out the right exit. He deserves better than being blindsided. The floor tilted beneath Seo-jin's feet. His jasmine scent spiked with something sharp, distress pheromones that he clamped down on with every ounce of control he possessed. "So, what's the timeline?" Jason asked. "After the merger closes?" "Maybe 6 months. I'll set him up, make sure he's taken care of financially. He won't want for anything." "And the Omega from the Choi family?" Victor pressed. "Elias Choi. His father controls Pacific Rim's distribution network. A mating bond between you two would lock the Asian pharmaceutical market for the next decade." "I'm aware." Dominic sounded tired. Not guilty, not conflicted, just tired. Seo-jin's disposal, one more item on a list of tasks that needed completing. "I've had dinner with Elias twice. He's suitable, willing. His family is enthusiastic." "And Seo-jin knows nothing about any of this?" "Seo-jin reads poetry and grades papers and believes that love is enough to build a life on." There was something in Dominic's voice that might have been affection, might have been pity. He doesn't understand how the world actually works. That's what I liked about him in the beginning. He made everything feel simpler. "Simpler," Victor echoed. "You mean naive?" Dominic did not correct him. Seo-jin's vision blurred. His hand moved to his stomach, a reflex he had developed in the past 6 weeks, touching the place where his daughter was growing, shielding her from what he was hearing. He stayed silent, stayed still, and something far quieter and far more dangerous than a confrontation happened instead. He went cold. The kind of cold that starts in the marrow and radiates outward until it reaches the surface and freezes everything it touches. The grief would come later. The rage would come later. But in that moment, standing in the hallway of the home he had mistaken for his own, Seo-jin experienced a clarity so sharp it felt surgical. He was temporary. He had always been temporary. The bonding ring, the promises, the quiet dinners, and the way Dominic held him after nightmares about his father leaving, all of it was a holding pattern. A pleasant arrangement that served Dominic's schedule until something more strategically valuable came along. Seo-jin walked to the bedroom on silent feet. He pulled his suitcase from the closet. He packed with the methodical precision of someone who had practiced emergency departures in their mind without ever knowing they were rehearsing. Clothes, toiletries, his mother's photograph, his copy of Yoon Dong-ju's poetry, the prenatal vitamins he had been hiding in a pouch inside his work bag, his laptop, his passport, his teaching credentials. He left behind the designer clothes Dominic had bought him, the jewelry, the watch that had been a birthday gift. He left behind the bonding ring. 14 weeks pregnant, 27 years old, with a teaching salary and a pride that had just been shattered and rebuilt in the space of an overheard conversation, Seo-jin Park rolled his suitcase through the lobby of a building he would never enter again and stepped into the gray Seattle rain. He did not look back. There was nothing to look back for. The bus station smelled like diesel fuel and stale coffee, and something sweet and synthetic from the vending machines near the door. Seo-jin bought a one-way ticket to Portland, not because Portland had any particular significance, but because the next bus leaving Seattle was headed there and he needed to be moving. Sitting still felt like dying. He found a seat near the back, pressed his forehead against the cold window glass, and finally let himself breathe. The trembling started in his hands and moved inward, rattling his rib cage, shaking loose something that felt like it had been holding him together for years. He did not cry. Not yet. The tears would come later, in a motel room with scratchy sheets and a heater that clanked like a prisoner rattling bars. For now, he pressed his hand against his belly and spoke to his daughter for the first time. "It's just us," he whispered, so quietly that even the woman dozing in the next row could not have heard. "I know that's scary. It's scary for me too. But I promise you, I will never let anyone make you feel like you're temporary. You are the most permanent thing I have ever done." The bus pulled away from the curb. Seattle's skyline retreated in the rearview mirror, all glass and steel and money, and Seo-jin watched it shrink until it was just another city where someone had loved the wrong person and survived. Portland was temporary. He knew that before the bus even arrived. Too close to Seattle, too easy for Dominic to find him if he cared enough to look, which Seo-jin's pride told him was unlikely. But his pragmatism whispered that Dominic was a man who did not like loose ends, and a vanished Omega with an unexplained departure might qualify as exactly that. He spent 3 nights in a motel near the bus station, eating from gas stations and scrolling through teaching job postings with the single-minded focus of someone who understood that forward motion was the only alternative to collapse. On the 4th morning, he found it. A posting for an AP literature teacher at a charter school in Ashland, Oregon, a small city near the California border known primarily for its Shakespeare Festival and its distance from everything else. The salary was modest. The cost of living was manageable. The start date was immediate because the previous teacher had left mid-semester for a family emergency. Seo-jin applied from the motel's lobby using the weak wireless connection that cut out twice during the upload. He interviewed by video call the next afternoon, wearing the one blazer he had packed and positioning himself in front of the motel room's one neutral wall. The principal, a beta woman named Claire Nakamura, was direct and warm and clearly desperate. "Your references are exceptional," she said, scanning something off-screen. "2 former department heads and a student who's now at Yale. Can you start Monday?" "Yes," Seo-jin said, and felt the first fragile piece of a new life click into place. Ashland was beautiful in the quiet, unperformative manner of small towns that had nothing to prove. Mountains in every direction, streets lined with independent bookstores and coffee shops that roasted their own beans, theaters that produced Shakespeare 8 months out of the year. A pace of life so deliberately unhurried that Seo-jin felt his chronically clenched jaw begin to loosen within the first week. He rented a 1-bedroom cottage on a quiet street, furnished it with secondhand finds and books and a small desk where he graded papers each evening with his feet tucked under him and a mug of ginger tea within reach. The ginger helped with the nausea. The routine helped with everything else. Teaching became his anchor again, as it always had been. His students at Cascadia Charter were bright, curious, and refreshingly unimpressed by authority. Seo-jin dove into the curriculum with the energy of someone who needed to prove, primarily to himself, that he could build a life worth living without the scaffolding of someone else's wealth or promises. He told no one about the pregnancy. Not his colleagues, not Claire, not the small circle of acquaintances he began to develop through faculty gatherings and weekend farmers markets. He wore loose layers, attributed his weight gain to stress eating, and scheduled his prenatal appointments in Medford, 30 minutes away, where no one from Ashland would see him entering the obstetrics clinic. He was 18 weeks along when the first moment of weakness struck. It was a Saturday evening. He was grading essays on Beloved by Toni Morrison, his red pen moving in steady strokes, when the baby kicked for the first time. Not the fluttering he had felt before, the ambiguous movements that could have been gas or muscle spasms. This was a kick. Definitive. Startling. Alive. Seo-jin dropped his pen. His hand flew to his stomach and he sat absolutely still, waiting, praying for it to happen again. When it did, a sharp, insistent tap from inside, he let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. "Hello," he said to his belly, his voice cracking. "There you are." And then, because the body remembers what the mind tries to forget, his hand reached for his phone. Dominic's contact was still there. He had not deleted it, had not been able to bring himself to erase the last digital evidence that the relationship had existed. His thumb hovered over the call button, and for one agonizing moment, every rational thought he possessed went quiet, and all that remained was the primitive Omega impulse to share this moment with his daughter's father. He set the phone down, picked up his pen, returned to the essays. The red ink shook slightly for the next 3 paragraphs, but his hand steadied, the way it always did, because Seo-Jin Park had been steadying his own hand since he was 11 years old, and he was not about to stop now. 300 miles north, in a penthouse that smelled faintly of jasmine and white tea. Despite every effort to air it out, Dominic Kang stood in his foyer and stared at a platinum ring sitting in a crystal bowl. It had been 4 days since he came home to an empty apartment, a closet half cleared, and a bonding ring returned without a word. 4 days of calls that went to voicemail, texts that showed as delivered but unread, and a growing, gnawing certainty that he had underestimated something critical. Victor had been the one to state the obvious. He heard us. Dominic had not argued. There was no other explanation. The timing was surgical. The precision of what Seo-Jin had taken versus what he left behind spoke to a mind that had instantly calculated the difference between what was his and what had been given and chosen to leave with only the former. "So find him," Jason suggested over drinks the following evening, with the casual confidence of a man who thought locating a vanished Omega was comparable to tracking a shipment. "He doesn't want to be found," Dominic said quietly. And for the first time in their decades-long friendship, Victor and Jason heard his voice do something it had never done before. It wavered. The truth, which Dominic would not admit to anyone and barely admitted to himself, was that Seo-Jin's absence had not produced the clean severance he had anticipated. He had expected logistics, discomfort, perhaps guilt, manageable and temporary, the kind that could be soothed by a generous financial settlement and the knowledge that he had given Seo-Jin 3 good years. Instead, there was a hole. There, not metaphorical, physical. A hollow space behind his sternum that ached when he breathed too deeply, that woke him at 3 in the morning, reaching for a body that was not there, that turned the penthouse's expensive silence from peaceful into punishing. Seo-Jin's jasmine and white tea scent lingered in the sheets, the towels, the pillow on the left side of the bed. Dominic told himself he would wash them. He did not wash them. The Elias Choi dinner happened on schedule. The Omega was exactly as Victor had described. Polished, appropriate, from a family whose connections could reshape Kang Biotech's future. Elias was attractive, well-spoken, and smiled at Dominic with the practiced warmth of someone who understood that this was a transaction costumed as romance. Dominic sat across from him in a private dining room, surrounded by the scent of bergamot and sandalwood that was Elias's carefully cultivated Omega pheromone signature, and felt nothing. No cellular stillness, no involuntary lean forward or sharpening of attention. His alpha instincts, which went from background noise to full alert the moment Seo-Jin entered any room, remained flatly, stubbornly silent. Elias was suitable. Seo-Jin was inevitable. The distinction hit Dominic like a physical blow somewhere between the appetizer and the entree, and he excused himself from the table, walked to the restaurant's balcony, and stood in the cold Seattle air while his hands gripped the railing hard enough to whiten his knuckles. He had miscalculated. Not a strategic error, not a bad bet on the wrong Omega, nothing Victor would recognize on a spreadsheet. He had miscalculated himself, had believed that love was a variable he controlled, an input he could adjust based on changing circumstances, when in reality it had been running his operating system for years, and he had simply been too arrogant to read the code. Seo-Jin was not temporary, had never been temporary. Dominic had told himself a story about strategic necessity and clean exits, and the story had been a lie he constructed to avoid the terrifying truth that he had found the person he could not live without, and had been too afraid of that vulnerability to admit it. And now, Seo-Jin was gone. The ring was on the table. The closet was half empty. The jasmine scent was fading. Dominic returned to the dining room, apologized to Elias with impeccable courtesy, and ended the evening early. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, staring at his phone, at the last text Seo-jin had sent him 2 days before leaving. It said, "Leftover japchae in the fridge. Don't forget to eat." Don't forget to eat. Such a small thing. Such an ordinary act of caring from someone who had been about to discover that caring was not reciprocated. Dominic pressed his thumb against the screen until it dimmed, and his chest seized with a pain that had no medical explanation. Wow, you've made it this far. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. All right, let's get back to the story. Months passed. The calendar turned with the indifference that time reserves for human suffering. Seo-jin's belly grew. His students learned to analyze metaphor and subtext. His cottage filled with second-hand baby furniture that he assembled himself using YouTube tutorials, and a stubbornness that his mother would have recognized. At 24 weeks, he could no longer hide the pregnancy. He told Claire first in her office after school on a Tuesday, with the door closed and his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Claire listened without interrupting. When Seo-jin finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "How far along?" 24 weeks. And the father? Not in the picture. The words tasted like gravel, but they were true, and Seo-jin had decided months ago that truth was the only currency he could afford. Claire nodded slowly. "Do you need anything? Adjusted schedule, medical leave, accommodation?" "I'd like to teach as long as I can. The work helps." "Then you teach as long as you can." Claire stood, came around the desk, and did something that caught Seo-jin completely off guard. She hugged him. Briefly, firmly, the way a person hugs someone they suspect has not been hugged in a long time. "You're not alone in this, Seo-jin. This school is a community. Let us be one for you." He managed to hold it together until he reached his car. Then he sat in the driver's seat and cried for 15 minutes straight, the kind of crying that comes from being shown kindness you had convinced yourself you did not deserve. The news spread through the school the way all news spreads in small communities, quickly and with more goodwill than Seo-jin expected. His students, far from being thrown by the revelation, rallied around him with a protectiveness that moved him daily. They carried his supplies without being asked. They lowered their voices when he looked tired. One girl, Maya, a senior with a talent for persuasive essays and a bluntness that reminded Seo-jin of himself at that age, cornered him after class one afternoon and said, "Mr. Park, if the alpha who did this shows up, I want you to know that I have a black belt and no impulse control." Seo-jin laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. "I appreciate the offer, Maya, but I think we can handle this with literature instead of a martial arts." "Literature never solved anything," she said, but she was grinning. "Literature solves everything," Seo-jin corrected gently. "It just takes longer." His 28-week appointment brought news he had not anticipated. The ultrasound technician, a cheerful beta who narrated everything she saw on the screen, paused mid-sentence and tilted her head. "Interesting," she murmured, adjusting the wand. "Your daughter's pheromone markers are already showing. That's very early." "What does that mean?" "It means she's likely to present as an alpha. The markers are strong. Unusually strong, actually." The technician glanced at Seo-jin with professional curiosity. "Her father is an alpha, I assume?" "Yes." Seo-jin's throat tightened. "That tracks. These markers are consistent with a high dominance alpha. She's going to be a force of nature." Seo-jin looked at the screen, at the gray and white image of his daughter curled in the space he had made for her, and felt something fierce and protective surge through him. An alpha daughter. Dominic's biological legacy made visible, undeniable, a permanent reminder that would wear his features and carry his pheromone lineage regardless of his absence. "Good," Seo-jin said softly, touching the screen. "She can be as forceful as she wants. She'll never have to use it to make someone feel small. Back in Seattle, Dominic's carefully constructed world was developing cracks. The Prestige Pharma merger closed successfully. Kang Biotech's valuation tripled. Victor orchestrated a series of celebratory events designed to showcase the company's new position in the market. Dominic attended them all, shook the right hands, said the right things, and felt absolutely nothing. The Elias Choi arrangement had stalled. Dominic could not bring himself to pursue it. Elias, perceptive enough to read the situation, had gracefully withdrawn after the third dinner produced no warmth, no chemistry, no indication that Dominic's alpha instincts recognized him as anything other than a pleasant stranger. "You're making a mistake," Victor said during one of their weekly strategy sessions, his tone edging from advisory to frustrated. "The Choi connection is worth billions. You're throwing it away for an Omega who left you." "He didn't leave me." Dominic's voice was quiet but lethal. "He overheard me calling him temporary, and he acted accordingly. That's not leaving. That's self-preservation." Victor stared. In 20 years of friendship, Dominic had never spoken about a personal matter with that kind of raw honesty. "Since when do you frame his departure as his right?" "Since I spent 4 months trying to sleep in a bed that smells like jasmine and realized that I destroyed the only thing in my life that wasn't a transaction." Dominic turned to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the Seattle skyline. "I told you and Jason that he was naive, that he didn't understand how the world works, but he understood something I didn't. He understood that a person's worth isn't calculated in strategic value. And the moment he heard me reducing him to a variable in a business plan, he made the clearest decision anyone in this story has made." "You're romanticizing him." "I'm seeing him accurately for the first time." Victor leaned forward. "Then find him." Dominic turned from the window. "What?" "If you're this wrecked, Dom, then find him. You have resources, private investigators, facial recognition access through the biotech security contracts. You could locate him in 48 hours. And then what? Show up and tell him I was wrong? He won't believe me. He shouldn't believe me. I sat in a room with my 2 closest friends and casually planned his disposal while he was in the next room. What words undo that?" Victor was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised them both. "The right ones might." Dominic hired a private investigator the following morning. Not to approach Seo Jin, not to make contact, only to confirm he was safe. It was, Dominic told himself, the minimum responsibility of an alpha whose omega had disappeared. The fact that Seo Jin was not technically his omega anymore was a detail he was not yet ready to examine. The report came back in 72 hours. Seo Jin Park, 27, employed as an AP literature teacher at Cascadia Charter School in Ashland, Oregon, living alone in a rented cottage on Maple Street, in apparent good health, visibly pregnant. The last 2 words detonated in Dominic's chest like a controlled demolition. Pregnant. Seo Jin was pregnant. The timeline blazed through his mind with the precision of a man accustomed to calculating probabilities. He had been with Seo Jin exclusively for 3 years. Seo Jin's suppressant regimen was something Dominic had helped him manage. The conception would have occurred during the period they were still together, which meant the child was his. Which meant Seo Jin had known he was pregnant before he left and had chosen to leave anyway. Had chosen to raise their child alone rather than remain with an alpha who called him temporary. Dominic sat in his office for 2 hours without moving. His assistant knocked twice and received no answer. Victor called and was sent to voicemail. The only thing that moved was Dominic's hand, opening and closing on his desk, grasping at absence. He had a child. He had an omega carrying his child in a small Oregon town, alone, working a teacher's salary, assembling furniture by himself while Dominic sat in a penthouse that was worth more than the entire street Seo Jin lived on. The shame was breathtaking. Not because he had done something wrong by conventional alpha standards. Many alphas maintained arrangements, discarded omegas when strategic needs shifted, treated bonding as a business decision. It was normal, expected, encouraged even in the circles Dominic moved in. The shame came from realizing that Seo-jin had never treated their relationship that way, had never calculated his return on investment, had simply loved Dominic with the full, unguarded sincerity of a person who believed love was the point rather than the means. And Dominic had responded by putting a price tag on his presence and finding it insufficient. He flew to Ashland the next morning. He did not tell Victor, did not bring security, did not plan what he would say, because every rehearsed speech felt like another manipulation, another performance designed to produce a desired outcome. And the one thing he owed Seo-jin was the opposite of performance. Ashland was smaller than he expected. Quieter. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke, and the particular clean sharpness of mountain towns where the atmosphere had not yet been colonized by exhaust and ambition. Dominic parked his rental car 2 blocks from the cottage on Maple Street and sat there as morning classes would be starting. Knowing Seo-jin would be at school, knowing the empty house would tell him nothing, but needing to see the life Seo-jin had built without him. The cottage was modest. A blue door, window boxes with herbs, a small porch where someone had placed a rocking chair and a stack of books protected from rain by the overhang. Through the window, Dominic could see a bookshelf overflowing in the same chaotic, beloved way Seo-jin's bookshelf had overflowed in the penthouse guest room. A lamp with a warm glow. The corner of a crib, partially assembled, visible through a doorway. The crib undid him. Because it was real. The baby was real. Seo-jin's choice to raise their child alone was real. And Dominic was standing outside like a stranger, which was exactly what he had made himself. He drove to the school. Not to confront Seo-jin, not to make a scene, just to see him. He parked across the street and waited, hating himself for the cowardice and the surveillance in equal measure until the final bell rang and students began streaming out. Seo-jin emerged 10 minutes later. He was carrying a tote bag heavy with papers and walking with the careful gait of someone whose center of gravity had recently shifted. His belly was visible now, unmistakable beneath a corduroy jacket that Dominic had never seen before, and his face had changed in ways that were both subtle and devastating. Thinner, yes. Tired, clearly. But his posture held a quality Dominic had never fully appreciated when he possessed it. Wholeness. Seo-jin looked whole. Not happy, necessarily. Not carefree. But integrated in a way that he had not been in Seattle, where some part of him had always been holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The other shoe had dropped, and Seo-jin had landed on his feet, and somehow, against every probability, that made him more beautiful than Dominic had ever seen him. Dominic's alpha instinct screamed at him to cross the street, to close the distance, to scent him, to wrap himself around the omega carrying his child and growl at anyone who came near. The biological imperative was so strong that his hand was on the door handle before his rational mind caught up and held him in place. He had no right. He had forfeited the right to protect Seo-jin the moment he called him temporary. And showing up now, uninvited, at Seo-jin's workplace, with an omega this deep into pregnancy was not protection. It was ambush. He drove back to the airport, flew home, and for the first time in his adult life, Dominic Kang did not know what to do. The weeks that followed were the most uncomfortable of Dominic's life, not because anything went wrong, but because everything that had always worked stopped working. The strategies, the calculations, the reliable equation of power plus resources equals control. None of it applied to the problem of having been genuinely, profoundly wrong about something that mattered, and needing to fix it in a way that centered someone else's terms rather than his own. He started therapy. Victor, upon learning this, assumed Dominic had suffered a psychotic break. You don't do therapy. You do strategic reassessment. This is strategic reassessment, Dominic said evenly. The strategy being reassessed is my entire approach to human connection. The therapist, a beta woman named Dr. Adela Torres, who specialized in alpha relational patterns, did not go easy on him. She listened to his account of the Seo Jin situation with the expression of someone who had heard variations of this story many times and was not inclined to offer comfort. You described the Omega you loved as temporary, she said during their third session. Whose language was that? Mine. Whose value system? Dominic was quiet for a long time. My father's. And there it was. The thread he had been avoiding since the day Seo Jin left, because pulling it would unravel something he had spent his entire adult life constructing. Dominic's father, Jae Sung Kang, had been the kind of alpha who treated relationships as portfolio management. His mother had been the Omega he chose for her family's pharmaceutical connections, maintained with expensive gifts and emotional distance until she was no longer strategically useful, and then discarded during a scandal that took the family company down with it. Dominic had watched his mother's destruction, had vowed to be different, and had then reproduced the exact same pattern so faithfully it was almost architectural. The difference between you and your father, Doctor, Torres observed, is that you're sitting in this chair. He never would have. That's a low bar. It's a start. Seo Jin, meanwhile, was navigating the realities of third trimester pregnancy with the same stubborn independence he applied to everything else, which meant doing too much, asking for too little, and occasionally sitting on the floor of his cottage at midnight eating peanut butter from the jar while his daughter performed acrobatics against his rib cage. He had built a life. A real one, not the borrowed luxury of the penthouse, but something that belonged entirely to him. His students respected him. His colleagues cared about him. Claire had become a genuine friend, the kind who showed up with groceries unannounced and refused to leave until Seo Jin ate something that was not toast. But loneliness had a texture in the third trimester that it did not have before. It sat in the empty chair at the dinner table. It lay in the other side of the bed that no one occupied. It lived in the moments when the baby kicked and there was no one to press a hand against his belly and feel it. No one to share the wonder and terror of bringing a new life into the world. He did not miss Dominic. He told himself this firmly and frequently. What he missed was the version of Dominic he had believed in, the one who held him during nightmares and whispered that he was the best thing that had ever happened to him. That version had never existed. It was a character in a story Seo Jin had written for himself, and the author, it turned out, had been unreliable. At 32 weeks, something happened that shattered the careful equilibrium Seo Jin had maintained. He was leaving school on a Friday afternoon when a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Not unusual in itself, parents drove all manner of vehicles, but this one had Washington state plates and tinted windows and stopped in a way that suggested purpose rather than pickup. The driver's door opened and Victor Hale stepped out. Seo Jin's blood went cold. His hand went to his belly. His scent, which had been calm moments ago, spiked with distress, pheromones so sharp that two passing students turned to look at him with concern. "Mr. Park," Victor called, walking toward him with his hands raised in a gesture that was probably meant to be calming and was absolutely not. "I come in peace. I just want to talk. How did you find me?" Seo Jin's voice was ice. The jasmine in his scent had vanished, replaced by something steely and defensive, the Omega equivalent of baring teeth. "Dom found you weeks ago. Private investigator. He came to Ashland, saw you, and left without approaching because he didn't think he had the right." Victor stopped about 10 feet away, reading Seo Jin's body language with the caution of a man approaching a wounded animal that might bite. "He doesn't know I'm here." "Then why are you here?" Victor's expression shifted. Guilt, improbably, but unmistakably. "Because I was in that room. When he said what he said about you. I didn't just witness it, I enabled it. I pushed the Elias Choi angle. I called you strategically irrelevant. And I've spent the last 4 months watching Dom fall apart in a way I've never seen. And I realized that I helped destroy something real because I was too focused on the spreadsheet to see the person. Is this an apology or a reconnaissance mission? Both. Victor had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Seo-jin, for what I said and for what I failed to say. You deserved better from everyone in that room, including me. Thank you for the apology. Seo-jin's voice did not warm. You can leave now. He doesn't know about the baby. The world stopped. Seo-jin's hand pressed harder against his belly, and his eyes, which had been cold and controlled, flashed with something raw. What? The investigator's report confirmed you're pregnant. But Dom, he's wrestling with himself over whether he even has the right to contact you. He's in therapy, which if you knew him the way I do, would shock you more than anything else I've said. He ended the arrangement with Elias Choi months ago. He hasn't touched the merger benefits that required a strategic bond. He's dismantling everything he built the plan around because he realized the plan was the problem. Therapy and regret don't erase what I heard. Seo-jin's voice cracked, just barely, and he hated himself for it. He called me naive. He said I was never the endgame. He was planning my replacement while I was carrying his child in the next room. He was wrong. He knows he was wrong. The question is whether that matters to you. It doesn't. Victor studied him. You're a terrible liar, Seo-jin. You always were. And you were always better at reading spreadsheets than people. Yet here we are. Seo-jin adjusted the tote bag on his shoulder. Tell Dominic whatever you want. But don't come back here. This is my life now, and it doesn't include anyone who once calculated my expiration date. He walked to his car, drove home, locked the door, and sat on the kitchen floor for an hour, his back against the cabinets, his hands on his belly, while his daughter kicked furiously against the spike in her father's cortisol. The phone call came at 11 that night. Unknown number, Seattle area code. Seo-jin stared at it for 4 rings, then answered, because not knowing was worse than knowing. Victor told me. Dominic's voice was rough, stripped of its usual control. About the baby. Seo-jin, I know you don't want to hear from me, and I know I don't deserve to ask, but I need you to know that I am not calling to negotiate or strategize or manage this situation. I'm calling because you're carrying my child and you're alone, and that is my fault. Every part of it. The leaving, the being alone, the fact that you felt you had to hide this from me. All of it traces back to what I did and who I was, and I am so sorry. I am sorry in a way that I don't have words for because words are what got us here. Seo-jin was quiet for so long that Dominic said his name again, tentatively, as if checking whether he was still on the line. What exactly are you apologizing for? Seo-jin's voice was steady now, controlled, not cold, but careful, the way a person speaks when they are holding something fragile. Are you sorry you said it? Or sorry I heard it? The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then Dominic said, I'm sorry I ever thought it. The saying it was the symptom. The thinking it was the disease. Another long pause. Then Seo-jin said, she's an alpha. The baby. They can already tell from her pheromone markers. She's going to be strong. He heard Dominic's breath catch, a sound so small and uncontrolled that it told Seo-jin more than any speech could have. She? A girl. Due in 8 weeks. Seo-jin. Dominic's voice splintered on his name, came apart at the seams, unrecognizable from the boardroom baritone Seo-jin had once mistaken for the whole of him. Please. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to earn back the right to be in her life. And in yours, if you ever decide I'm worth the risk again. But I understand if you don't. I understand if temporary is what I get, because that's what I offered you. And maybe that's the only justice that makes sense. Justice isn't what I'm looking for. Seo-jin closed his eyes. His daughter kicked against his palm, adding her opinion. I'm looking for someone who sees me and this child as permanent. Full stop. No qualifiers. If you can't do that, then don't come to Ashland. Don't call again. Let me raise her in peace. I can do that. I want to do that. I have never wanted anything the way I want that. Wanting and doing are different verbs, Dominic. You taught me that. He hung up, set the phone face down on the counter, pressed both hands to his belly and whispered, "Your father is either the biggest fool in the Pacific Northwest or the bravest man I've ever known. We're going to find out which." 3 weeks later, a package arrived at the cottage. No return address, but the handwriting on the label was Dominic's, that distinctive architect's print that Seo-jin had seen on 1,000 sticky notes left on the fridge. Inside was a first edition of Yoon Dong-ju's poetry, the same collection Seo-jin had pulled from his jacket pocket the night they met. On the title page, in Dominic's handwriting, were 2 lines. For Seo-jin, the sound of someone refusing to disappear. I should have listened harder. Seo-jin sat with the book in his lap for a long time. Then he placed it on the shelf next to his other copy, the worn paperback that had survived the bus to Portland and the motel and every uncertain night since. 2 copies of the same poems. One from the beginning. One from whatever this was. Dominic arrived in Ashland on a Tuesday in early March, 8 days before Seo-jin's due date. He did not come to the cottage unannounced. He texted first, a brief message that read, "I'm in town. I'm staying at the Ashland Springs Hotel. I'm here for as long as you'll let me be. No pressure, no timeline, no strategy." Seo-jin read the text 3 times, then replied, "The coffee shop on Main Street. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Come alone." He came alone. Seo-jin was already seated when Dominic walked through the door of the Beanery, a cramped and wonderful coffee shop where the barista knew Seo-jin's order by heart. Dominic looked different, thinner, lines around his eyes that had not been there 7 months ago. He was wearing jeans and a sweater, no suit, no armor, and when his gaze found Seo-jin across the room, his entire body went still, in a way that Seo-jin recognized, because it was the same stillness he had felt that first night at the fundraiser. Dominic sat down across from him. His eyes moved to Seo-jin's belly, visible and undeniable now, and his jaw tightened with an emotion Seo-jin could not immediately name. Reverence, perhaps. Or grief for the months he had missed. "You look good," Dominic said, and then immediately shook his head. "That's inadequate. You look like someone who built a life from scratch with his bare hands, and I look like someone who deserves to sit across from you even less than I did 7 months ago." "Less flattery," Seo-jin said, wrapping his hands around his decaf. "More truth." "Truth." Dominic leaned forward, his forearms on the table, his cardamom scent deliberately muted, dialed down to avoid overwhelming Seo-jin's space. "I've been in therapy twice a week for 4 months. I ended the arrangement with Elias Choi and dissolved the strategic bonding clause from the Prestige merger. Victor resigned as COO because I told him that anyone who could sit in a room and calculate the disposal of someone I love doesn't get to run my company. I sold the penthouse." Seo-jin's cup paused halfway to his lips. "You sold it?" "It smelled like you. Every room, every surface. And I couldn't live in a place that reminded me every day of what I'd thrown away." Dominic's hands were clasped in front of him, knuckles white. "I bought a house in Ashland." The coffee shop seemed to contract around them. "When?" 3 weeks ago. I know how that looks. I know it looks like I'm inserting myself into your life without permission, but I'm not asking you to live with me, not asking you to take me back. I'm asking to be close enough that when our daughter is born, I can be there if you want me there, and if you don't want me there, I'll still be in town waiting for as long as it takes. You uprooted your entire life." I uprooted the wrong life. The right one was always here. Dominic's voice dropped, and the control he had been maintaining slipped just for a moment, revealing something underneath that was raw and shaking and real. Seo Jin. I have spent my entire career identifying what's valuable and acquiring it. Companies, patents, market share. I am very good at recognizing worth, and I failed to recognize the most valuable thing I have ever had. You are not temporary. You were never temporary. I said those words because I was terrified of needing someone as badly as I need you, and I dressed my fear up as strategy because that's the only language I knew. But I'm learning a new one, slowly, badly, and I will keep learning it for as long as you'll let me. Seo Jin looked at this man he had loved and fled from, and missed in ways he would never fully articulate. He looked at the lines of exhaustion, and the earnest, frightened eyes, and the hands that were gripping each other, because they had nothing else to hold. And he made a decision. Saturday, he said. I have a prenatal appointment in Medford at 2. You can drive me if you want. Dominic's breath escaped in a rush that fogged slightly in the cool coffee shop air. Yes, I want that. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Seo Jin stood, his hand pressing his lower back where the pregnancy weight concentrated. I haven't forgiven you. I may not forgive you. But my daughter deserves to know her father tried, and I deserve to know whether you're capable of being the man you're describing, or whether this is just the most elaborate acquisition strategy in pharmaceutical history. The ghost of a smile crossed Dominic's face, the first Seo Jin had seen. I probably deserve that. You definitely deserve that. Seo Jin picked up his coat. Saturday, 2 o'clock. Don't be late. He was not late. He was 15 minutes early, standing beside a silver rental car in front of Seo Jin's cottage, holding a bag of pastries from the bakery on Oak Street that Seo Jin had mentioned once, months ago, in a text that Dominic had apparently memorized. The drive to Medford was careful and cautious, both the vehicle and the conversation. They talked about Ashland, about Seo Jin's students, about the Shakespeare Festival that was gearing up for spring season. Neutral territory, exploratory, two people relearning the sound of each other's voices. At the clinic, the ultrasound revealed a healthy baby girl, measuring in the 90th percentile for growth. When the technician turned the screen toward them, and the room filled with the rapid drumbeat of their daughter's heartbeat, Dominic went utterly still beside Seo Jin. His hand moved toward Seo Jin's, stopped, hovered, uncertain. Seo Jin took his hand, placed it on his belly where the baby was kicking, watched Dominic's face as he felt his daughter move for the first time, and saw the alpha who had once calculated human worth like stock prices come apart at the seams. Dominic did not wipe his eyes. He let the tears fall openly, his hand pressed to the place where their child lived, and his scent flooded the room with something Seo Jin had never smelled from him before. Awe. Sharp and sweet and helpless. The pheromone signature of an alpha recognizing his offspring for the first time and being utterly undone by it. She's strong, Dominic whispered. She is. She gets that from both of us. The days that followed were not a reconciliation. They were something more tentative and more honest. Dominic kept his distance, respected boundaries, showed up when invited and backed off when not. He helped finish assembling the crib without being asked, a task that involved 3 failed attempts and a grudging phone call to a hardware store employee who talked him through it. He stocked Seo Jin's kitchen with the specific brands of ginger tea and prenatal vitamins he had researched obsessively. He attended a school event at Seo Jin's invitation and sat in the back row watching the man he loved coach teenagers through a poetry recitation, and his face held an expression that several parents later described to each other as a man realizing he almost lost the best thing that ever happened to him. It was not enough, but it was a start. Seo Jin's water broke at 3 in the morning on a Wednesday, 2 days before his due date. He was alone in the cottage, which was exactly how he had planned it. He had a bag packed. He had a route to the hospital memorized. He had, despite every intention to handle this independently, Dominic's number at the top of his recent calls. He drove himself to Ashland Community Hospital, checked in, changed into a gown, and then sat on the edge of the bed with his phone in his hand, feeling the contractions build like waves approaching a shore. He had a choice. He could do this alone, as he had done everything since leaving Seattle. Rebuild his career, his self-worth, his belief that a life without Dominic was not just survivable, but good. Or he could let someone in. Not because he needed to, because he wanted to. He called Dominic at 3:27 in the morning. "The baby's coming," he said. "Room 412. He heard the sound of a man who was already moving. Already out the door, car keys in hand, the kind of speed that comes from having waited for exactly this call for months. "I'm coming. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't, Seo-jin, just don't have her without me. Then drive fast and don't run any red lights. I won't forgive you if you die in a car accident tonight." Despite everything, Dominic laughed. Dominic. And it was the most honest sound Seo-jin had heard from him in a very long time. He arrived in 8 minutes. Burst through the hospital room door still wearing the clothes he had apparently slept in. His hair uncombed, his cardamom scent spiking with anxiety and protectiveness, and something that hit Seo-jin's omega instincts like a warm wave. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped just short of the bed, his hands hovering, wanting to touch, afraid to presume. Seo-jin grabbed his hand and placed it on his belly where the next contraction was building. "If you're going to be here, be here. Not hovering. Present." "Present," Dominic repeated, his voice thick. "I can do present." He pulled a chair to the bedside, sat down, and did not let go of Seo-jin's hand for the next 11 hours. The labor was brutal. Seo-jin, who had always believed his pain tolerance was above average, discovered new and unwelcome categories of sensation that made him seriously reconsider every life choice that had led to this moment. Through it all, Dominic was there, steady, attentive, fetching ice chips and adjusting pillows and taking Seo-jin's increasingly creative profanity without flinching. At one point, somewhere around hour 7, between contractions, Seo-jin looked at Dominic and said very clearly, "If you ever call anyone temporary again, I will raise our daughter to be the kind of alpha who dismantles your company from the inside." Dominic, who had not slept and had possibly been crying intermittently for the past several hours, said, "That's fair. She was born at 2:17 in the afternoon. 6 pounds, 11 ounces. A full head of black hair. A cry so loud and indignant that the nurse laughed and said, "Alpha lungs on that one." They placed her on Seo-jin's chest and the world restructured itself around a single irreversible fact. She was here. Real and warm and furious and perfect. Her tiny fist closed around Seo-jin's finger with a grip that was, the doctor confirmed, unusually strong for a newborn. Her scent was new but already identifiable. A blend of her parents. Jasmine and cardamom and something entirely her own, something bright and clean like morning air. Dominic leaned over them both, his forehead touching Seo-jin's, their daughter between them, and his scent wrapped around the 3 of them in a cocoon so dense with protective alpha pheromones that the attending nurse stepped back instinctively. "Hana," Seo-jin said softly. "Her name is Hana. Hana." Dominic touched her cheek with one finger, his hand trembling. "It means one. It means beginning," Seo-jin corrected. "And in Korean, it means the very first. She's our first. Our beginning." Dominic kissed Seo-jin's forehead, then their daughter's. "Our permanent beginning." 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in June, Seo-jin stood in the doorway of the house Dominic had bought in Ashland, a craftsman bungalow 3 blocks from Seo-jin's cottage, with a yard big enough for a garden and a porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs. Hana was asleep in the crook of his arm, her alpha scent already strong enough to turn heads at the grocery store. Dominic was in the kitchen, assembling a high chair from a box of parts that had defeated him twice already, muttering in Korean at the instruction manual. They were not bonded. Not yet. Seo-jin had made it clear that a mating bond was something earned over time, not promised in a gesture of remorse. Dominic had agreed without argument, had settled into the long patience of a man who understood that trust, once shattered, could only be rebuilt in the same currency it was destroyed, not in grand gestures or expensive gifts, but in daily, unglamorous, relentless consistency. He had transferred Kang Biotech's headquarters to Portland, a 90-minute commute that he made 3 days a week, working remotely the other 2 because proximity to his daughter was not negotiable, and proximity to Seo-jin was the organizing principle of his new life. Victor had been rehired in a reduced capacity after a series of conversations that included apologies so uncomfortable they made both men physically ill, and the company was thriving in ways that proved Dominic did not need a strategic omega bond to build an empire. Seo-jin returned to teaching in September. Claire held his position, hired a long-term substitute, and welcomed him back with a faculty lunch that included a cake shaped like an open book. His students, upon meeting Hana during a school visit, collectively decided she was the class mascot and began leaving tiny knitted hats on Seo-jin's desk with alarming regularity. On a Tuesday evening in October, Seo-jin was grading papers at the kitchen table in Dominic's house, which he had started calling our house, without noticing when the shift happened. Hana was asleep in the nursery. Dominic was beside him, reviewing clinical trial data on his laptop, close enough that their elbows occasionally touched. Seo-jin. He looked up. Dominic had closed his laptop and was watching him with an expression that held none of the calculated confidence Seo-jin had once mistaken for strength. What it held instead was vulnerability, raw and unpracticed and brave. "I am going to ask you something," Dominic said, "and I need you to know that whatever your answer is, nothing changes. I am here. I am staying. Our daughter is my permanent commitment regardless, but..." He reached into his pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table between the essay rubrics and the coffee mugs. Inside was not a platinum ring. It was simple, brushed gold, unadorned, the kind of ring a literature teacher might choose for himself. "I want to bond with you," Dominic said, "not because it's strategic, not because it secures anything except the fact that I am yours and you are mine, and our daughter grows up knowing that her fathers chose each other with their eyes open. I want to bond with you because you are the least temporary thing in my life. You are my gravity, and I have spent the last year learning how to be worthy of that, and I will spend the rest of my life continuing to learn." Seo-jin looked at the ring, looked at Dominic, looked at the nursery door where their daughter slept, strong and permanent and named for beginnings. "You still haven't finished assembling the high chair," Seo-jin said. Dominic blinked. No, I haven't. Is that relevant?" "It's extremely relevant." Seo-jin picked up the ring box, held it for a moment, then looked Dominic directly in the eyes. "Because I'm going to say yes, and then you're going to finish that high chair tonight, and you are not going to strip another screw." The sound Dominic made was not dignified. It was something between a laugh and a sob, and the involuntary exhale of a man who had been holding his breath for a year. He pulled Seo-jin from his chair, held him with the careful ferocity of someone who understood that what he was holding was irreplaceable, and his cardamom scent flooded the kitchen with pure, undiluted joy. "I love you," Dominic said into Seo-jin's hair. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again." "Good." Seo-jin pulled back just enough to look at him. "Because I've been loving you this entire time. Even when I was furious, even when I was alone, even when I told myself I didn't. And that terrified me more than the pregnancy, more than starting over, more than anything. So yes, Dominic Kang, I'll bond with you. But you should know that our daughter's first word was no, and I'm raising her to use it as often as she needs to." Dominic smiled, wide and real and full of a happiness that looked earned rather than assumed. I wouldn't expect anything less. That evening, after a dinner that was only slightly charred, Seo-jin stood on the porch with Dominic beside him and Hana warm against his chest. The ashland sky was clear and thick with stars, more stars than Seattle's light pollution ever allowed, and the mountain air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke and the mingled pheromones of a family finding its footing. Seo-jin thought of his mother, of jasmine and white tea and ginger and peach, of the light that went out and the woman who kept going anyway. He thought of the bus station in Seattle and the motel in Portland and the cottage with the blue door where he had proven to himself that he was not temporary, that he had never been temporary. He thought of Yoon Dong-ju, who counted stars in a prison cell and refused to disappear. And he thought that some poems are not written on paper. Some poems are lived, slowly, painfully, in the space between leaving and arriving, between being called temporary and choosing to be permanent, between the end of one story and the beginning of another. The stars burned overhead. Hana sighed in her sleep. Dominic's arm tightened around them both, steady and warm and present in a way that felt, finally, like it would last. Seo-jin tilted his face to the sky and breathed. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time.